to talk about ways that teachers can build their own trust in their students. Ways that teachers can build trust in their students, of them, and ways to build students to trust themselves as good people. So it's 3 different kinds of trust. And to talk about some of the techniques or ways we have in the classroom to help build this kind of trust. One of those ways is through using cooperative learning or partner work, where children work together and are taught the skills of so doing in kind and caring and thoughtful ways, and ways, particularly ways in which the teacher manages the classroom in terms of building trusting relationships with the student. So the origins of my knowledge of what I am talking about comes from about 20 years of work with the Child Development Project. Before the Child Development Project, I worked as a classroom teacher, kindergarten teacher, etc. But in the 20 plus years that I worked on the Child Development Project, we focused on ways, looking at schools and building ways to create classrooms and activities that would foster caring teacher-child relationships, friendly child-child relationships, and to build each student and each teacher empathy and moral understanding. Next slide. The Child Development Project worked in approximately 10 different school districts and in approximately 30 different schools. Over the course of a good 12 years or so, as we worked in individual schools and classrooms, we gradually created a variety of programs or ways that teachers and schools might foster students' moral development. One of those was through the use of children's literature. A second one was how one organized the classroom by having students work cooperatively in an effort to teach them skills and caring through that cooperation. Engaging children and giving them opportunities to be helpful in the classroom or helpful in the school. Then class meetings, which invited children's voice into the classroom, provided an opportunity for teachers and children to plan together and to create a sense that they were in this together, and to provide students with genuine voice. And then 5 is something called developmental discipline, which was at the time and may still be in many schools. The idea was that discipline was about controlling children, and it was about using the least painful method to get them to do what you want them to do. And the Child Development Project's goal was to teach children to be caring, moral people, which means to teach them outside of discipline, that they were not being, quote, good kids because they were going to get a reward, and they were not being good kids because they were going to avoid punishment. They were being good kids because they wanted to be, because they wanted to be helpful, because they wanted to be caring, because they wanted to be responsible. So the idea was to focus on when kids misbehave and discipline is required, that one would focus on understanding why the unfortunate or quote unquote bad behavior happened, and then to teach the skills that the child would need to not have it happen again, or to change what's happening in the classroom to better support the kids so they would be able to behave in caring moral ways. Primarily, the idea was to avoid rewards and punishment, though on some occasions, when a teacher couldn't reach a child, it might be necessary to have the child removed to a different part of the classroom, etc. There are ways that sometimes teachers do exert power, but the focus was on social and emotional teaching, moral teaching. Okay? We'll look at 4 of what we discovered after a number of years of working in different schools and continuing to change what we did depending upon how the teachers responded, their advice, their suggestions, and how the kids behaved. So one of the most useful ways of introducing moral issues into the classroom is part of what's core to classroom teaching. It's the use of children's literature. And to say, teaching children reading is not just about teaching them to decode words in a book. It's teaching them to think about ideas, to think about what's happening, to see in one of the things about children's literature is it provides many, many examples. I can't think of a single book that you could use with children that is real literature, not somebody that developed a book of ABCs, where moral behavior is happening, where kids are stressed to perform morally. And so to look and use the moral examples, the examples of moral behavior, to discuss them. Why did the child behave the way he or she did? Why did the people around him respond as how they did? What are some of the ways that in this book, the main character did the right thing, cared about others, that the sort of using moral literature as examples of the ways that being kind and good and responsible have served to make the world a better place. We assume that everyone wants to make the world a better place. How did these moral behaviors make the world a better place? And there are hundreds and thousands of examples in children's literature. Secondly, to teach children about others who live in different environments. So if I'm working in a group of students in Kentucky, if all of the students in my classroom are white, I want to have them read books that involve other examples of others. If they are dealing with, let's say, a classroom of all boys, how do we help them understand that the world is not just about boys? How are we kind and moral toward girls? If they are about kids who speak, well, in our case, English, how about the kids who are from, say, Mexico and are struggling and speak Spanish? How do you how do you use that kind of teaching in your children's literature to have kids understand one another and provide the support for struggling students rather than laughing. Okay, next slide. Cooperative learning or partner work is one of the key ways that teachers have to guide students as they interact, as they try to be good moral people. We found that the standard at the time that we were doing this was groups of 4, putting children in groups of 4. For all the kids we worked with, and indeed those were kids from, say, 2nd grade through 6th grade, groups of 4 were too hard for them to manage. Somebody took over and everybody else followed, something like that. So we moved to what we called partner work, our version of cooperative learning. In partner work, the teacher would usually look at the particular skills that an activity she's about to give the students will draw on. So if it's really important for the 2 students to work together in doing a writing assignment, how will they do that? How will they share the materials? How will they share responsibility? If it's reading to one another and talking about some questions, how will they show respect for one another? How will they not laugh at one another? We would ask the teachers to meet with the students before they work together to guide them about the kinds of skills that working well will be necessary in this activity. And each activity would have different skills, and each level, depending upon the student, would require different skills. So cooperative learning required the teaching of interpersonal skills almost daily, or even more times in a day, or whenever you set the students out to do something cooperative, you go over with them how are the ways are you going to show respect and trust with your partner. And then also the whole idea of working in cooperative group is you're basically just building friendly relationships. If kids work together in groups and they're successful, they will be more friendly and caring toward one another. So that cooperative groups is one of the ways of building a sense of friendliness in the classroom. Okay, next slide. All right. A third piece was class meetings, which we spent a long time in developing, and class meetings were very important. Those of you who have looked at Learning to Trust, you will see so many examples of what kids brought to their class meetings. But let's just take a look from a large perspective. What are some of the things that class meetings do for you? If you meet with the kids, we would advise meeting at least once a day, sometimes twice, in the morning to get kids moving, and in the afternoon to reflect on how the day went. And so let's just start with the morning meeting. The idea of building a sense of community. We're in this together. How do we make this a good classroom for all of us? Secondly, you know that there are certain goals and certain activities you're going to do during the day. So the class meeting provides an opportunity for the teacher to discuss the goals, to describe the activities, and then to set the kids off on the rest of the day. At the end of the day, class meetings provide the opportunity for students to reflect on their learning. It doesn't even have to only be at the end of the day. Sometimes at the end of an activity where kids have all worked in partners to do certain kinds of tasks, of learning tasks, it helps to bring them together and have them reflect together on how their activities went, on what did they learn, and what did they do to make the activity work well. It's also often useful, especially to give kids a sense of autonomy, a sense that they are an active part of making the classroom go, is to involve them in planning activities. If you want to have a party, what shall we do? If you're anticipating a new student, how do we make a new student welcome? Just a discussion with kids on what they can do for situations that exist in the world and in the classroom. And then finally, to discuss problems affecting the class. Many, many times, things go wrong on the playground. Fights happen, kids get angry, name calling, different things happen. Class meetings provide, often when kids would involve themselves in kickball or, I'll just say kickball, good enough. The teacher would bring the class together and say, this is what I saw. These are the problems. I saw people hurt. I saw people crying. How do we solve this? What can we do to make our class better? What can we do to make playing games work better and no one be hurt? It basically provides a way of bringing the kids when they're not in the heat of the moment, but rather when they're in a reflective time, to think and to realize that there are ways they could have been better, and they will bring that new thinking to their next relationships. Okay? The hardest part of the program, the hardest of the ways we hope that teachers would be able to build children's social and moral development, was what we called developmental discipline. And this, for many teachers, and I suspect in your situation that's also true, many teachers thought of discipline as a way to control the classroom and control the students, particularly the antsy, nasty little kids, in order to get the curriculum, to go through the curriculum and really get the kids doing their math and carefully reading, etc. So that the idea of actually teaching moral development was simply not part of the schools. And we look at discipline as one of the very central ways that a teacher can teach moral development at the very point where the student is ready to hear it, right when it's applicable, not in some sort of general detached way. So developmental discipline recognizes that many of the students do not have some of the skills that are absolutely needed for moral behavior in a complex, challenging situation. Skills like self-control. So teaching what we would call social and emotional skills is part of developmental discipline. And when one is hit with a discipline situation, you have an ideal place to teach the skills that you see are missing, if the skills are what's missing, right? Not always it's skills, sometimes it's self-control. All right. Secondly, to encourage teachers to support and guide behavior, to anticipate what kinds of struggles the kids would have, and when things go awry, to gently make suggestions, to guide, to help. The third is when misbehavior occurs, when kids, shut their minds and sit down and say, I won't do it, or when they call one another names, or when the myriad of things happen, to use the least restrictive way to prevent misbehavior. So you can prevent misbehavior if you keep all the kids in a cupboard and you don't, each one in their own cupboard, and you don't let them interact. They won't misbehave very often because they can't. You need to, the kids need to interact, the kids need to be tested, and what you want to do is to provide guidance and support that so basically shape their tasks or the situation to make the misbehavior less desirable. All right, the next one is to avoid punishment as much as possible. It's not about punishment. That is not the reason for being moral. It is not moral to avoid punishment. Avoiding punishment is a selfish thing. Rather, one has to help students see the importance, the goal, the joy of helping someone, of being kind, of being moral. When the inevitable misbehavior occurs, to focus on reparation. Again, you might think of reparation as punishment, but in fact, it is not punishment. It is about undoing harm you have done. Using reparation, especially in a gentle way of working with the student to understand, this is a harm you created. This is a problem you've created. How can you undo it? How can you undo the harm? How can you make up for the harm? And a guided conversation to indeed provide a very focused and very centered moral instruction. Okay? How are we for time? Did I take too much time? I want to do now is to share an example of a child's misbehavior. And this example is from the beginning of the year. The classroom is a classroom of second and third graders. That means they were basically 7 to 8 or 9, somewhere between 7, 8, or 9, mostly 7 and 8. It's the beginning of the school year. And the teacher teacher realized that by and large, her students didn't really get enough to eat. They were extremely poor. This was a very poor neighborhood. And so she always planned to have cookies. Now, this day and age, everyone's eyes would go up because we don't feed children sweets, but she did, okay. So she would bring in cookies every day. They were not a prize. They did not go just to the good kids or the quiet kids. They went to everyone. And she would have students help her do these various activities, one of which was to pass out the cookies. So on this particular day, she chose a couple of students to pass out the cookies. And one of her students, Martin, was just furious because he didn't get picked to help, this is Laura's voice, to help me pass out the cookies. When it was time for our read aloud, that means she gathered the class together every day uh, and would read aloud from a story that they were working on. So when she gathered the class together to hear the story, Martin sat back in the corner and put his coat over his head. I said, "Martin, we're going to listen to the story now." From under his coat, he replied, "I hate you." Next slide. I told him I was sorry to hear it, but we went on and started reading the story. So she just left it alone. After about 4 or 5 minutes, I said, "Martin, I need you just to come up here right now. I know what's wrong with you. You're feeling left out. So come sit up here and let me put my arm around you." Next slide. That's what we did for the rest of the story, and he was fine. At the end of the day, he came up to me and gave me a big hug. Okay, a simple little thing. This is such a tiny thing, what we just saw, but it avoided punishment. Laura had many choices. She could have asked Martin to go and sit in the back of the room if he wasn't going to. She could have sent him to the office. She could have made fun of him. Instead, she left it alone because she didn't know what to do. But it was early in the year and she sure didn't want to punish. And she had all the other kids gather in front of her, so she's stuck. So she sat there, she started the story with her mind going round and round of how she could reach out. After a few minutes, she decided, "I'll try again." And what she did then was to reach out, show some sympathy, and invite him to join, and putting her arm around him. So she repaired and re-said to him, "I love you." And he responded. He responded, not with anger, but with appreciation. So sometimes that's a small thing that you can do. Build in the child's heart a sense of trust of you. The next time, perhaps he will trust her more. Not perfectly, by no means, but every one of these little things, the child begins to see you as someone they can trust. Okay.
In this precise situation, the student is complaining about what do we have to practice all the time things in the school, in the context of lining up for lunch. So the teacher shows her the real reason why we should practice this, because we have to do it in a really, I mean, we have to get this right, and we can do it in a calm way. So the teacher shows her the real meaning of the situation, but she doesn't engage in a fight with the student. And then she gives her the time to reflect about what happened in this, about her behavior. And I suppose that the reason why she used the story is to give her time also to was some sort of an example of what could be done in a different way. At the end, the student gets her own conclusion about what was wrong. I mean, not just about her behavior, but what could be different if she thinks in a different way. And I think that's very powerful. So we think this is developmental discipline because of that. I mean, it's not just about, I mean, you have to show what's wrong. That's one thing. You have to show what is going on in a very bad way, but you don't have to engage in a little fight with the student. You can give them the time to reflect about what happened and give them other ways to find out how they can change their behavior. And I think that is more powerful than punish them or something like that. At the end, that is a new point of departure. You know, the teacher realizes that the student actually came up with a really good conclusion about what could happen if they think in a different way. And that is something that you can use then to build a new behavior.
Mhm.
I'd like to add something that I think isn't clear in the example. This was the second year that Traylin was in Laura's classroom. So they had built a very good, strong relationship the first year. And this is well into the second year. In the first year, Laura would never have been as direct and demanding as she was in this instance. Also, Laura had in the course of the year taught the children a technique called self-talk, that they could talk and say in their mind how they would handle a situation. So if they were stressed or pressed, they would just have to say, now be quiet, calm down, look to see what others are doing, different things that are called self-talk. So it's also the case that Traylin is telling Laura that I use self-talk. I was saying in my mind, if you can make up your mind, you can do anything. Good, what do I want to say? A good reward to the teacher that some of her teaching has stuck with her student. Anyway, I just felt I didn't give you enough context for this one.
Paulo and I, we were group 3. Our situation was that there was an assignment. They had to write a role play, but one of the members of the group misunderstood the assignment and was writing a summary. The teacher said to them both, well, you are supposed to write a role play. And one of the members of the team said, we have already done it. And this is what developmental discipline means, because the teacher says, I know, but sometimes if things aren't going right, serious learners will just start over. And that is a really powerful sentence. We consider that it generates reflection, refers to both of the students, avoiding blaming just one, gives a balance to the relationship, and avoids a power relationship, because no one will feel that it's more intelligent or got better the instruction. Both were at the same level, which is very positive. We also think that it is, well, that's the approach. It's the learning that it fosters, like it's the constructive learning, like it's something that, like the teacher, when she says this, or he says, well, in this case it's Laura, but when she says this, it is giving a reflection, and she's not, she's quite generating something very constructive. And what we think that this experience support the developmental and moral relationship in the classroom. I think that both, I mean, like the team learned that by working together and by redoing the assignment, because at the end they do the assignment again, then they were able to succeed, and they were able to accomplish what the assignment was, like the objective of the assignment. So I think that, I mean, we think that the reflection the teacher made was very powerful, and that's why developmental discipline was able to fit in this situation. That's it.
Thank you, Caro. Marilyn, Do you want to add something there? So here is group 4.
Well, I guess that we didn't, I mean, we wasn't sure that we were group 4. So we spent some time in the number 3. So basically, but we had the chance at least to go through 4. So basically this was a story of two children trying to lead. The girl was leading, and when it was the turn for the boy to lead, she didn't allow him to lead. Somehow she pushed him and she didn't allow him to lead. So the teacher, okay, so here the teacher asked her if she was leading. So she said like, yes, I was leading. I already led. No? So why are you leading if you already led? Well, Chantel said like embarrassed somehow because she wasn't allowing Paul to lead, and the teacher somehow confronted her. In the next slide, it was like, yes. So the teacher, once she replied that she was leading, so why she was leading again? So she said like, I think that maybe you were bullying because I saw Paul asking and asking and you refused to give up. It was kind of, get real. You were not letting him lead, but then she sent like a safe, something safe for her, because the teacher asked like, what should have done, what you should have done. And she replied like, okay, give it to him. So she finally found out, that she wasn't doing the right thing. So the teacher was really smart to give her like a way to go out after reflecting. So I guess that was something like giving her an opportunity to make it up. I don't know, Priscilla, if you want to complete.
I was thinking that wasn't the teacher being judgmental when she said that you were bullying? Because I saw Paul ask and you refused to give up the lead. Isn't she judging the student, or, was it actually a bullying experience? I don't know. I don't
know, but she was confronting him, her, no? So
she was, but I don't think that the judging the kid as to saying you were bullying him, I don't think that was actually bullying.
That was hard, but then she gave like the opportunity what you should have done, no? Like,
yeah, that's true. But yeah, I still feel, I don't know what Dr. Marilyn thinks, but I still feel it's judgmental to actually state that the other kid was.
You're bullying, yes.
It's definitely naming what happened. It's somebody would say it's calling a spade a spade. By saying what she saw, that is Laura saying what she saw, was that it was bullying. I'm going to read to you a little more from this story because I didn't want to put it make such a long slide. But let me read to you what happened next.
Okay.
Now I can find it. I said, yeah, maybe you need to sit down and write about this, while the other kids went up to computer. So she wrote this little note and handed it to me. Quote, to Miss Ekin, when someone tells me nicely I have already been first, if I forgot, I could say in a nice way, quote, no, I haven't. And they say, yes, you have. And I should say, oh, yes, I have forgot. I should not bully people around. Then she said, and here, I wrote this for Paul. I didn't ask her to do that, but she wrote to him. To Paul, from Chantel, I am sorry for trying to bully you around. Do you accept my apology? Well, anyways, if you do, give me thumbs up. Now, I think I know what it feels like to be bullied around, and it does not feel very good. If I don't want people bullying me around, I should not bully other people around. Signed by Chantel. Finished.
I want to chime in. I want to chime in for a minute. Priscilla, particularly for your question, a big part of parenting and teaching is setting high expectations, but scaffolding to help kids have a chance to meet them. And these are great examples of scaffolding and high expectations. So naming it as bullying, while the word, it's a pejorative word, but if I'm assuming in this class, they've talked a lot about bullying over the 2 years, and they know that it's a non-acceptable behavior in this group. And so it's naming something they've probably talked about a lot, and it's holding the bar high. It's keeping that standard there. But she scaffolds very nicely in each of these examples to give kids the possibility and the tools they need to be able to get close to or meet that high expectation. But what you don't want to do is just lower the expectations and simply, not want to use a label that says I'm being evaluative of you, because evaluating kids' missteps is important for them to learn not to misstep. It's different than punishing. It's saying we haven't agreed, and these standards are usually agreed upon. They're communal standards. As a class, we've agreed that we won't bully each other. As a class, we've agreed we'll take turns. As a class, we've agreed we'll be honest, and so on. And so she's violating probably agreed upon norms that she helped create. And that's really important.
Yeah, and the reflection afterwards shows that the girl took it very well. I mean, she actually made a reflection on her own as to what was wrong about her behavior, because sometimes we tend to judge the kid. As adults, we feel powerful and overpower them at times, and we don't give them that opportunity for them to reflect upon their behavior. So I think the note actually was the message of the learning process that went through the kid's mind.
And another really important point is all this stuff is not happening in a vacuum. All this stuff is happening in a school that invests in this in a very explicit way as their identity. Relationships, as Marilyn has said, have been cultivated between teacher and child, child to child. So they understand what's expected of them. They understand what will happen when they stumble. They understand that this school and this teacher believes they can be better, that they can reach their best selves. All that stuff is context for the way these kids react to these situations. And that's really important to remember all the work that's been done to fertilize and till the soil, to be able to grow good character.
All right. Yeah, good reflection.
Okay. Are we moving on to looking at the kids in high school?
Yes, we have 5 minutes more, so I want you to share us what happened with these kids years later.
Oh, okay. I had the good fortune of going back to Louisville, Kentucky, where this school is, and interviewing a number of the students who were in the class that are in the book. And to see when the children were either freshmen or sophomores, at the end of their freshman or the end of their sophomore year in high school. And to get a sense through talking to them, whether or not Laura had made a positive difference. What is it that they think? But what is it that it looks like they in fact learned? So I chose 3 students to look at because I didn't know what our time was going to be. So I chose, first of all, the 2 angriest and difficult students that were in the class. One of those is Martin. And I'm trying to read, and so here is Martin's brief memory of the class. The question was something like, what difference did Laura make, or what did you learn in Laura's classroom? And Martin replies, attitude. I used to have a bad attitude until I got Mrs. Ecken. She changed that. She's the one who really got me into sports, doing good in school, focused on my work more, and try to make it somewhere in life. Now, you don't get any of that in the scenarios because all of that is behind the scenes. Laura went to his baseball games. Laura encouraged him when he said he wanted to be a football player. Laura kept telling him about going to college. Most of what she did with him was helping him, although she had to control the living daylights out of him many, many times. But in the end, that is at least as in high school, his remembrance is that he got a better attitude. He approached life with more positiveness. He was doing good in school. And in fact, he had friendships and he graduated from high school. One of his goals was to graduate from high school, to be the first of my mama's kids to graduate from high school. And he was. So one never knows the sort of long-term effects. I wish I could go back there and see those kids now, but too long. Shall we go to the next one? Which is a comment from, isn't it a comment from Trey Lynn?
Yes, it's here.
Yes, okay. Again, the second most difficult child in the classroom. And as she reflected in this interview, she says to the question, you know, what do you remember about the class? She comments, I learned how to read, and I love reading now. I had an attitude problem. This is a direct quote. I learned to control my attitude and to think before I act. I learned a lot from her, but I think the biggest would be reading and how to control myself. So we have an example, a long-term example of how a child can carry through a number of years these very important lessons that have to do with being a good and successful person. They held that. They knew that. They remembered that. They carried it with them into, at least into high school. Now, I think one might question, okay, we've heard about the kids who make all the trouble and take all the attention. What about the good kids in the classroom? Are they, are they just champing at the bit to have a better teacher and to have more attention? What is their focus. So this is a comment from Paul. And Paul, if you may remember, was the student in the cooperative activity where he was supposed to, not the cooperative activity, he was the student who was supposed to lead the class to lunch. And Chantel just bullied right over him, and he gave up and said, after actually saying twice, but I'm supposed to lead, he looked at the teacher and gave up. Okay, well, how does Paul remember the class having been bullied? Quote, "Some teachers just pass their image over you. Mrs. Ekin wouldn't do that. She'd get to know you. She didn't judge you by who you hang with or how you looked. She'll always be my favorite teacher." So he doesn't think he suffered. Next quote. Then reflecting on his class, what did he remember about the class? His comment was, "There weren't really no bad kids in that class." I love this quote because it tells me that Laura succeeded in building friendships and trust and positive relationships among the students. Even the good students learned not to resent and hate the troublemakers. It's what we sometimes worry about, that if we pay, and Laura paid way more attention to Martin and to Wanda than she had to pay to Paul. But she gave Paul enough attention that he saw the class as supportive of him, and enough attention to make him his favorite teacher, someone who will always be his favorite teacher. As a teacher, you can't want more than that. Now,
Thank you, Marilyn. We are reaching our time, but I think we have questions for you. I don't know if the people who is here have a little bit of time to do the questions and like take advantage of Marilyn here and share with her some time, because we are like, we can have 5 minutes of questions and then we can move to the satisfaction survey and leave. Carolina, dale.
Wait, well, I think Laura, as a teacher, she's an example. But what I have always been questioning myself is, how am I going to do with my teachers? I mean, we have at school a lot of teachers, and I would like them all to be like Laura in the comments they made and the things they say and how they approach certain situations. How would you, I mean, what's your piece of advice on how we can help, I mean, do that with our teachers? How can we help them, all of them, because it is a group, it is not just one, there are many.
yes. Well, I wish I had a simple answer. I can actually think of someone that it might be fun to establish a conversation with, who's someone who's done a lot of work with the Child Development Project and is now working in a school district in Washington, where her role is to help teachers adopt basically the practices of Laura, help teachers build friendly relationships, help teachers run class meetings, etc. She ran a wonderful classroom herself, and it's another story to help someone else. How many teachers do you deal with on the hand? How many teachers do you work with?
Well, we have many, but
Oh,
in my
okay.
in our section, we have like 16 group directors. 16 group directors.
So at a time, let's say, in a 6-month period of time or a year's period of time, how many teachers are you interacting with?
All of them, all the time.
Okay, 100 teachers all the time?
No, like the 16 of them, like
16, 16
yes,
teachers. Okay,
yes.
16 is a reasonable size, but you need to put your efforts where you think you can make a difference. You're in a different place than a teacher in a classroom of young children because they are essentially, what's the word I want? They are raising the children. And they spend all day with them and can work very hard because they have a lot of time with the children who are very difficult. You are working with, you said 18 teachers, and you are seeing them once a week. I'm guessing it's once a week. You see them once a week. You observe them. What's the relationship you have with them?
Well, we see like all the time. Like we have meetings. We see in the hallways. We meet in their classrooms. We visit them. Like we are
Okay.
all the time together, and we talk together very often.
Okay, got it. All right. So you're in and out of their classrooms and pick up conversations when you see things or there to respond to questions, etc. Then do some shared readings. The short book from, help me there, Marvin, from collaborative classroom, the moral.
Collaborative classroom.
No, the Center for the
No,
Center for Spiritual and Ethical
Right,
Education.
Center for
The
Spiritual.
little book, Discipline for Moral Growth.
It's sharing it with the teachers. It doesn't cost much. Or ask teachers if they would like to be part of a study group in which they could read something like Learning to Trust, not a paragraph, but a chapter, and then get together and talk about it. It will allow them to be in some kind of control of what they're doing, to raise issues, and allow you to hear some of their concerns and issues and strengths, so that then when you are walking around from class to class or meeting them in the hallways, you can make small comments on what they've done connected to these ideas, connected to working with the children in caring and supportive ways.
And Marilyn, I want to also remind them and you, although you know this, they've already seen some of the DSC videos that we've got on our website because I use them in training. And there are many more on there. So you can actually watch Laura with these kids in real situations. So if you watch those together with your staff and then discuss them in the same way that Marilyn just modeled for you in the written scenarios, that's another way to enter into this conversation.
Thanks, Marvin. And that's kind of fun. People do like watching videos.
¿Tienen alguna otra pregunta? Do you have any other question? Priscilla, you are talking, but in mute.
You know, when I've been working with the primed concepts throughout the school year, sometimes I feel that the problem here is the adult. The adult does not have the skills to be able to be a good role model. So sometimes I think, wow, we should first start with the teachers, you know, tune them in before expecting them to behave in certain ways and be the good role models that we're seeking in schools, because they had a different upbringing and they tend to repeat their past story with their kids, and that's what makes it difficult. Sometimes having them reason is hard. So I love the idea of Dr. Marilyn when she stated that, let's have a reading or a book club together so that we can do a change of perspectives, because I think that the real problem here in our schools is the adults.
What you say is very important. You will not change everyone.
Yeah.
You will not. And your goal is to make what positive changes you can.
True.
I believe classroom teachers can change every child for the better in their classroom. But I do not believe as adults that we can do that, but we can work to do what we can.
Exactly. Exactly. But it's a way to keep us thinking about a different approach towards the process of classroom management and discipline, and what we used to think was the correct way to do it. And teaching kids about this language of emotions, which is so difficult, and learning how to read what's happening to them and prevent a situation, being much more proactive. That's really a challenge for us, but I feel that we need to invest much more time, especially now that when we're coming back in August. I'm thinking, oh my God, I would say that the whole month of August should be dedicated to that social emotional well-being, because I mean everybody has been moved with this situation, so it's much more of my concern than real academics. And then we have parents pushing us that we should deal with the academics, because kids at home have left many of the skills that they were supposed to be working to finish and complete the school year. And it says, what are you thinking? I mean, they have gained so much more out of being at home and learning to cope with their problems and cooperation and critical thinking and being creative. I mean, so many other skills that they've gained. So, I mean, we have to look at it as to what is the positive that's going to come out of all the situation.
You don't have an easy job.
No, at all. Not at all. Very hard.
Thank you.
But very rewarding. Yeah.
Yes. It's great to have you here. And I hope, Marilyn, that this experience, your second experience with Zoom, has been a good experience.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you so much. Very powerful.